Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is episode 109 of the Meet the Farmers podcast, and I'm your host, Ben Eagle. And we're doing something a bit different today, and we're turning the focus towards nutrition and our own bodies, specifically gut health. After all, farmers spend their lives producing food for our bodies, so we should probably take a bit of time to understand what it is that we really need. I have a growing personal fascination really with this subject. And I should say that alongside one of my guests today, I'm currently exploring how our sea buckthorn crop, which we grow here on the farm in Essex, relates to the gut. But that aside, there are a whole host of things that we need to understand when it comes to understanding the gut. And today's guests are going to give us an insight into the current science and practice behind it. I'm joined by Dr. Lucy Williamson and Dr. Sally Bell. Welcome to you both. Lucy is a freelance nutritionist and former vet from Hertfordshire. She works with British farmers and food producers through her Food Links initiative, advising them and helping with product development and marketing using evidence-based nutritional science. In addition, she's a visiting lecturer in nutrition and dietetics at the University of Hertfordshire, nutritionist for Love British Food, and she runs her own nutrition consultancy. Sally is an NHS GP and a practitioner of functional medicine based in Nottinghamshire. After training in general practice, she spent 3 years as an aid worker in Darfur and Uganda, then spent 8 years as an inner city GP and still works today on a part-time basis in NHS urgent care. She's also a private consultant working with clients on a model based around the 5 foundations of health, which I'm sure we will go into today: movement, sleep, rest, connection, and of course, nutrition. Thank you to you both so much for coming on. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and I'm really looking forward to just understanding more about this subject and getting an overview, because we are, as I understand it, so far fairly early on when it comes to the science and general understanding behind this. But I mean, gut health it's one of those things that impacts on all of us, even if we might not know much about it. And the point of today is to give an overview to hopefully inspire listeners to go away and find out more. Let's start with definitions, because that's a good way to start, probably. Sally, what do we mean when we refer to gut health itself?
I think it's a great question, and I think before you can ask that question, I think we need to kind of throw open the role of the gut, because certainly when I trained in the 90s, and a lot of my consultants and GPs who trained at the same time, our understanding back then was really, it was all about, absorbing your nutrition, breaking it down, and then at the end of the day, pooping it out as part of that kind of detoxification system. And I think over the last sort of 25 years, our understanding of the role of the gut has changed massively. And then more recently, our understanding of gut bacteria, the gut microbiome, which I'm sure we'll go and talk about, has exploded on the scene, and it's in vital importance in terms of health. But just to help people understand that the gut is so much more than just digestion. So, about 70% of our immunity, that ability to fight infection and allergy and disease, is actually found, in our gut. So when we're thinking about, staying COVID-free, actually the importance of our gut health is really important. We also understand that probably 80-90% of our happy hormones are actually made in our gut. And here we are kind of being told that our depression is because we've not got enough of that hormone in our brain. There is no research to actually back that up. And actually, maybe we should be looking at the gut in terms of when we're thinking about mood disorders. And then also there's this massive thing that we've learned to understand in terms of the gut-brain axis. We're now hearing this phrase called, the brain, the gut is the second brain. And there's more information going from the gut and the brain than anywhere else in the body. And actually 300 times more information going from gut-brain to brain-gut, as it's constantly informing our body of what's going on in our external world. And then we have to think about the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome is our bacteria, our gut bacteria. And again, in the 90s, we didn't really understand what that was. We've probably grown up thinking bacteria is bad and we need to get rid of it. But actually, we're now learning to understand that this colony of bacteria is doing amazing things for our health. And as we look after it, it looks after us. And actually, we have more bacterial DNA than we do human DNA. We're actually more bacteria than we are human. And actually, we're now seeing that when this community gets disrupted, it can affect nearly every area of health, whether you're looking at autism, Alzheimer's, heart disease, mood disorders. It all starts in the gut. It was actually Hippocrates that said, all disease starts in the gut. And he was the father of modern medicine 2,000 years ago. So when you're looking at gut health, we're not just talking about symptoms. We're not just talking about the absence of disease. Actually, we need to think beyond that. And actually, we need to be thinking how we nurture that gut bacteria, because it's doing such a vital role in all aspects of our health, our immunity, our mood, our digestion, and as well as, like, the gut actually is a sensory organ. We feel our emotion in our gut, and actually, if we're not looking after emotional health, we can actually have a gut disorder. So it's so much going on, and that's why we're all so passionate about health. And so it's more than just the absence of disease, in my view. We all need to be involved in pursuing a healthier gut.
Fascinating. Lucy, Sally's been pretty comprehensive there, but is there anything you'd like to add there?
No, I think that's exactly it. It's well, I always think of it really as the medicine of the future. It's a huge topic, and you've done a really good job there, Sally, just kind of trying to get it in a bit of a nutshell. I think for me, one of the key, the sort of fundamental basis of it, I suppose, is that we as humans have evolved with bacteria. Bacteria were really on Earth long before we were, so it's a very natural process that we've evolved together, and therefore why shouldn't we need each other and depend upon each other for best health? And at the end of the day, that's what gut health is all about. It's looking after the microbes in our gut, as Sally says, in order for us to have the best health that we can, because they are so influential of in so many systems in our body, which I know we'll go on to discuss. It's a fascinating, certainly absolutely fascinating topic, and it's all very, a lot of this research is only in the last 5 to 10 years. And actually, just to mention very quickly, one of my favorite quotes from a colleague is, with gut health, it's almost as if we're trying to close the stable door after the horse has bolted, as far as science goes, because already it's out there. Everybody knows that term now, and you're seeing it suddenly on food labels and everything. But the science is, it's rapidly increasing all the time. So we're trying to kind of keep control of it and learn all about it at the same time as wanting to get the message out there, because it's so important for our health.
Yeah. In some ways, you've answered this in many ways, but I think it's really important to consider the whys. Why talk about this subject in the first place? I know that this particular audience, there might be lots of farmers out there just wondering why I'm profiling this on the podcast in the first place. I already know the reasons why, but what are those reasons? What are the benefits to our immediate and long-term health, and how is it especially relevant at the moment when, for obvious reasons, health is probably our biggest concern right now? Lucy?
Yeah, I think Sally certainly touched on one of them, which is that as far as our immunity goes, it's absolutely pivotal. Sort of 70 to 80% of our the cells that make up our immune system are sitting in our gut wall, and our bacteria that are within the gut are there to ensure it develops properly and it therefore functions properly, and it teaches it not to overreact. So but of course, in the middle of a pandemic, we're all wanting to make sure our immune system is as effective as it can be. So that's certainly making it very relevant at the moment. I think also we're all just becoming so much more connected back to nature, and really I know this is one of the great reasons why you're doing this on your podcast, Ben, is that gut health is a fabulous way of connecting back to nature. It's so much of it and we'll go on to talk about this, is the way it connects back to the health of the soil, the health of our foods, the health of ourselves. And so, I think it very much fits with how a lot of us are feeling at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, Sally, why do you think people why is this subject come to the fore now?
Yeah, I think it's important to immediately, if you look after your gut health, you feel good. And we all want to feel good. So just a quick win there. But I think the evidence is really, really robust. Like, if we don't look after our gut health, it is linked with every chronic disease going. And we all want to live well. We all want our kids to live well. We all want a long life. And I think you cannot do that and ignore gut health anymore, because we know it's so fundamental. And so learning how to live a lifestyle that nurtures your gut health is the key to what we all want, which is to feel good and to live well. And so I think it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah. I briefly introduced your backgrounds at the start, but could you tell me where your interests in gut health specifically came from, Sally?
So I was a conventionally trained GP. I've done the war zone thing, and I came back and worked in the inner city, and I loved my work, but I just got to halfway through my career where I felt like I was a pharmaceutical vending machine. Like, it was just, here's this disease, here's the drug treatment. And I would have 10 minutes at a time with patients, sometimes 40 a day, and people a day, and they didn't know me and I didn't know them, and I just got sick of medicating things, sick of never getting to the bottom of things, sick of treating a part of somebody instead of understanding the complexity and the beauty of how we are an integrated system, and sick of treating the individual outside of the context of community and nature. And then I lost my own health and kind of went through the system, had all my tests and what have you, and got my diagnoses and drugs. It was the tipping point for me. And so it was that was when I went back to the books to work out, what our bodies needed to heal. And really the science from when I was trained in the 90s and how our medics are still trained, it's changed so much, like in terms of nutrition and genomics and gut health and the gut microbiome. These are all things I knew nothing about. And so I recovered my own health and then started practicing on anybody who'd let me have a go. And then was amazed at the things that would get better, autoimmune diseases and, things that I'm taught should never get better. And then, as I've developed my practice, I get really complex medical problems come through my door. People who have been a lot of places and tried a lot of things. Yeah. And what I've noticed is that if I'm stuck, if I start with the gut and we work on that, I'm amazed at what gets better. The acne gets better and the joint problems get better and the energy gets better. And so I'm so convinced, actually, as we bring that to the forefront as a therapeutic way of helping people get better, that the body then, it taps into what it's brilliant at doing, which is healing itself. So that's why for me it's just so fundamental, because I see it happen in real practice, real people's lives, and I see people recover, the joy of living, and that's why I went to be a doctor.
What about you, Lucy? Can you tell listeners a bit about your story?
Yeah, it's interesting. We both ended up in the same place, but from very different starting points. And I guess you mentioned, Ben, my background as a vet. And certainly as a vet, I got hugely interested in nutrition generally as a preventative measure for good health, and used to have a lot of success with trying different diets, particularly for dogs. And I began to sort of realise the power, really, if you like, of food as opposed to medicine. And then I stepped away from work for a long time to bring up our family. And when I then decided I wanted to follow nutrition more, and I was doing my master's at King's College in London, which was only actually 6 years ago, I was really lucky because they're at the forefront of a lot of the research that's going on there. So I'll never forget the day when I had my first lecture on gut health. And to put that into perspective, I was in my late 40s at the time, having had a career in veterinary medicine, and I just had no concept of gut health up until that point. And it from that day onwards, it just changed my whole excitement actually towards nutrition. And I love it because it's based on such great science. It's not a faddy thing. It's it's just, it makes so much sense. It's extremely practical. We can all do it really easily. It's, it's available to everybody. It's so I just, it's certainly my main interest as a nutritionist, and it has to be, because it affects so many different health systems. It is at the heart of so much. So that was, I suppose, my route to it, and it's certainly the sort of backbone of everything I do as a nutritionist.
I think it's interesting, Ben, just to say, because some people go to their GP, and I have colleagues who still aren't convinced that nutrition matters. We have no nutrition training. I have colleagues who have never heard of the gut microbiome. I mean, they're in their 40s and 50s, and it's not out of, a lot of GPs and a lot of doctors are just desperately trying to keep up to date, following guidelines, the pressures, and we don't often have that opportunity to learn. And so what one of the difficult things, I think, for your listeners and for people who maybe want to focus on gut health is that they might not be able to get that information from conventional GPs. And I still have colleagues or people who are oncologists and have patients come to me who've told me that diet doesn't matter, it's got nothing to do with health. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So you have to, what we are talking about, isn't mainstream in terms of conventional medicine yet. It's coming, and definitely there's a move towards making it more mainstream, and a lot of really great active people doing that, but it's not there yet.
I mean, let's turn towards farmers specifically. Apart from obviously for their own health, potential benefits for their own health, why might it be important for farmers to start thinking about gut health, Sally?
I think for me, farmers hold the future of the health of our nation. My kids' health in their hands. I really passionately believe that, and I think it's important, because I think all health starts with soil health, and I'm not sure. I think the evidence is emerging in terms of the link of that and to our own health and gut health. And it is one of those things that you're watching unfold. But for me, looking to farmers who are looking after their soil, and then, for gut health, it's diversity. Like, we need to diversify, our diet. And so we need to be looking to our farmers, preserving those seeds and providing the opportunity for us to buy a diverse diet. And then I think, like, it's very clear that some of the agrochemicals that we're using is in our food, and it's impacting gut microbiome, and it's disrupting our hormones, so those chemical messengers that are in our body, and it is contributing to chronic disease. So I think, farming in terms of providing diversity, providing nutrient dense food, and providing chemical free or low chemical usage in terms of what's getting into our food chain is just really, really important. So yeah.
Lucy, you already work with quite a few farmers. You work with us on our farm. Are you finding those conversations with the growers who you work with? You finding there's an intrigue there?
Yes, it's definitely coming to the forefront, and I suppose the farmers I tend to work with are the ones that are trying perhaps to diversify a bit more, so maybe they're more interested in the topic as well. But yeah, I mean, they're certainly more aware of it, and I think really the absolute key is soil health. It's where it all begins. And so the farmers who are particularly aware of the importance of biodiversity, of course, are also the ones that are aware of, as all farmers are, they're the guardians of our land. So they're, hopefully all trying to do the best possible to look after the health of the soil. But I think it's a really interesting concept as well, just to think that, as Sally says, it's the more diversity we can get into the soil and the less chemicals, the fewer chemicals we can use, the better, certainly. But also with my vet hat on, I think it's fascinating that if we actually think of ruminants like cows and sheep, and really their whole digestive system is one big microbiome. I mean, they have, all their digestion is through fermentation of food, mostly grass, the biggest resource we have in this country, and they very efficiently convert it from an inedible food into a nutrient-rich food by fermentation.
Yeah, I was going to say,
bacteria.
Can we just pause on that? As you just go into a little bit more detail on that, because I mean, how relevant is this discussion that we're having for animals as well as people?
Yeah, so I mean, it's exactly the same. As far as, I mean, we can describe ourselves as monogastric, so we have one stomach, whereas, for example, a horse has two areas where that where their fermentation happens. I mean, I'm slightly translating the science incorrectly, because obviously the microbiome that we're talking about ourselves is within our large intestine. It's nothing to do with our stomach.
Yep.
But horses could be described as having two places where that fermentation happens, in their cecum and their large intestine. And in cattle, they have three stomachs, and in all three of those areas there's fermentation going on. So it is pivotal to their health as it is to our own health. But also, I think there's this fabulous connection that you can talk about the gut health of cattle. I'm going to use them as an example, because they're when cattle's just graze, when they're wandering around the fields and they're trampling dead dry matter into the soil, that action on its own improves the soil health, because the carbon is being taken down deeper into the soil by the worms and the the billions of microbes that are in the soil, and then converting it and making that soil richer and healthier. And healthier soils trap an enormous amount more carbon. So it's the whole thing. It's like we're just part of this one big ecosystem. But yeah, it just occurred to me recently that we could almost be talking about the gut health of cows being pivotal in improving our soil health, which then is required to produce a lot of healthy crops, because obviously we know we need to be eating a lot more plants in our diet.
Yeah, because I mean,
the whole thing is interconnected.
Yeah, on soil, and I completely understand that you're both mostly human health experts as opposed to soil experts. But I mean, let's turn towards the soil microbiome specifically. I mean, many more and more farmers seem to be exploring this, especially as regenerative agriculture is starting to become pretty much the mainstream now. I mean, can we actually draw comparison between the microbiome in the soil and our own microbiome in the gut? And I know that you both have an interest in this area. So who wants to start on that? Sally?
So again, I think constantly, even this week I've been reading more research on this, and it's constantly evolving. And so one of the guys I have my eyes on is Dr. Zach Bush, constantly, and Tim Spector is another good place to look for more detail on this. But I do think in terms of the comparison in terms of what our gut microbiome and what the soil microbiome is doing is very, very similar in terms of making nutrients available, and there's this whole exchange system going on, and how it's how it's kind of training immunity within plants, and it's training immunity within our own body, and so there's so many comparisons in terms of the story, in terms of what it's doing in the soil with plants and animals, and what it's doing in our own in our own bodies. It's a very similar story, and that's why it's so important, because there's this kind of symbiotic relationship going on. And now I think what's really interesting, what I'm watching for, is as we change, as we farm differently and we really look after the soil microbiome, will it affect our gut microbiome? And I think that's the story we're looking for and watching emerge. Now, intuitively, I would say yes, but I'm not sure I could say I'm not sure I have the expertise to explain and understand the science around that, but I think it's emerging. I'd love to hear what you think, Lucy.
Yeah, I agree completely, and certainly your point, Sally, on the gut bacteria making our nutrients more available to us is definitely, I think, a really nice analogy to make with soil health. So just as our own bacteria, they not only produce nutrients on our behalf, like vitamins, through their fermentation of the fiber in our diet, but they actually activate some of the nutrients in our food, like some of the antioxidants in plants, for example, have to be activated by gut bacteria before we can absorb them. So our own bacteria enable us to extract more nutrient from our food, just like Sally said. And then if you think about it in the in a farming setup, you've got plants very much, those that are growing in really rich and healthy soils are certainly going to be able to extract more nutrients.
Yep.
And if you think about it, the big aim we've all got at the moment is that by 2050, I think it is, in 30 years time, we're going to have to feed 10 billion people in the world. So nutrient dense food is now what we're trying to achieve in farming. And certainly improving soil health will improve the nutrient density of our food, and that's what it's all about, isn't it, really?
No, I think you've very much hit the nail on the head there. And I mean, and it is that leads us on to plant breeding, and I suppose what we're trying to achieve here. I mean, and it's easy to generalize, but plant breeding has pretty much become geared towards the efficient conversion of light into carbohydrates, one of the oldest energy conversions in the book. Do you think that plant breeders should and could also take into consideration gut microbiota, and if yes, what might they be looking for? Where does the science here fit in terms of gut research, human health research, and plant breeding? This is a big topic here. Lucy, I'm going to turn to you on that first.
I think you might be the expert, Ben, out of the three of us on this particular topic.
Not sure about that.
I think, what we tend to hear most about is that we need to eat more fiber to look after our microbiome, our gut bacteria. And actually that's very true. Fiber is one of our most important prebiotics, that one of the nutrients we need to nurture those gut bacteria. But also I mentioned antioxidants, and they're really important as well to nurture the gut bacteria. So plants are a rich source of antioxidants, your own crop of sea buckthorn being one of them, but all our wintergreens, carrots, all these brightly coloured plants, they're full of antioxidants, a lot of which we require gut bacteria to actually activate them and get the benefit from. So there are so many there are many phytonutrients, those chemicals in plants that are so good for us. And the one I would pick out certainly is antioxidants as far as our gut bacteria go. I don't know if Sally has any more recent knowledge on that particular.
Yeah, I was going to say, and Sally generally is sort of leading on from that as well. Is there an opportunity here, and can you see a growing opportunity for growers producing literally for health? We've seen over the last 12 months a huge increase in direct sales, in opportunities for growers to interact with customers on a direct scale. Is there greater opportunity for that moving forward? And could we foresee a shift in not only what we're consuming, but what we're growing on that basis?
Yeah, so I think definitely, I think some of the key messages around gut health is the quality of food. Tim Spector recently produced a bit of research, and really the key things. I think we need to establish first to your listeners that you can change your gut microbiome within a few days of changing how you eat. And we need to also bear in mind that there are other lifestyle issues that damage our gut health, not just our food. But one of the things is the quality of the food, and that's meat product and plant-based products. And while I think both Lucy and I would agree, that there needs to be a plant slant to our diet, and we need the diversity and But good quality animal products can have a part of that too. And actually, it's some of the most nutrient dense foods in the planet, isn't it? Animal products, and it can have a part in improving gut health. And so I think in terms of farmers producing, the diversity is really important, because we're sick of eating 3 types of apples and the same kind of carrot. And when we know there's so many other, different varieties out there that we can't get access through our supermarkets. And so for, being able to directly access diverse, well-grown food is important. I think what's important also is people are catching on to this idea of nutrient density. And, I interviewed a guy from the States who's developing, a nutrient dense little spectrum thing where you can measure the nutrient density of food, whether that was a farmer or whether that was a consumer. And I think that will be important. I was really surprised when he presented his research how you could have carrots produced in the same season, and one could have 10 times as much nutrient density as the other. And so I think
it's incredible.
There's hope there where farmers are going to be able to start proving that actually their carrots, we only need one of them because you've got to eat 10 of next doors because it will make sense. And I think following the research about how we grow and how that impacts nutrient density is important. I think the role around phytonutrients, so these antioxidants, these plant compounds that, Lucy said, the magic happens in our gut, and it helps release these things. And a lot of these plant compounds then interact with our genes and help detoxification and do all amazing things to help keep us healthy. And so phytonutrients are important too, not just our micronutrients and our macros. Like, it is also about these other plant compounds, and being able to demonstrate that actually your plant products are rich in these things will be really important too. And I think I read a wonderful study looking at cancer using a particular molecule called salvestrols, and they are produced in ripening plants. And so and they're looking to see whether they can develop it and use it as a chemotherapy agent. But the point in the research is that if you use fungicides, the plant doesn't bother producing them. And so, again, like it's amazing to see how we grow and then impacts the phytonutrients and how that then interacts with my body and helps me keep cancer free, for example. As well as how far our food's traveled. We know that if we're buying whatever from over, our blueberries from Peru, that they were probably picked when they weren't ripe, and therefore you've lost all of what's developing in those last few days of that season, and which affects not only nutrient density but the phytonutrients. So there's lots to think about there, and I think we as consumers are getting more and more educated, and we want well-grown, diverse, nutrient-dense, packed with phytochemicals, chemical, free or low chemical. Like, I understand, I'm not a farmer, I understand that that there is a role, because we know it's now impacting our gut health and our whole health. So.
Wow.
Go farmers.
I was going to say, huge amount in that. Let's turn towards the science of the impact of diet itself on the gut. What's actually going on? Sally, can you just explain firstly, I suppose, the process, the process first of all, in terms of what's happening physically during consumption, and then Lucy, perhaps you can just give some ideas of how particular how a particular diet, how particular foods and types of food impact on the gut.
I do think we just need to take a moment just to set it within the context, because I have people on the most perfect diets and still have terrible gut issues, because there are other things that affect gut health and gut symptoms and the gut microbiome. And so we need to understand the food piece within the context of actually sleep deprivation. What I think 89% of our 20-year-olds are getting less than 6 hours sleep a night. And that amount of sleep deprivation is having a devastating effect on our whole health, but it's also impacting our ability to digest, and it's impacting our gut microbiome. If you look at stress, that really is a pandemic that's been going on. And we know that when we're stressed, the stress response is to shut down digestion and to shut down immunity, and has an impact, a direct impact on our gut microbiome. And so way before we start thinking about diet, we do have to set the context. Am I sleeping well? And am I managing my stress?
Yep.
Because if you eat the perfect diet and you're sleep deprived and highly stressed, it doesn't really matter, because you're not going to absorb it anyway, and your gut microbiome's up the chute. So actually just some of the simple things, really pursuing good sleep, aggressively managing your stress is going to set you into a place to then think about how your body is responding to what we eat. And also, bigger than that, there are other things that are affecting our gut health, medications we're taking, antibiotics, how we're born, whether it's a cesarean section or vaginally. And so there is a bigger picture going on when we look at diet. And sometimes we can get so neurotic about diet, we can also be highly stressed about it, and then kind of defeated the object. I think the big thing in terms of gut health is getting off highly processed food. Like 60% of our calories come from highly processed food made in factories. That has nothing to do with how we've eaten for centuries and millennia. And I think the big message is around, whole food. I don't care whether it's vegan, paleo, just the first thing, getting away from factory made food, getting back to real food is the biggest message when you're looking at eating. And also our relationship with food matters, how we eat, slowing down, being present, tasting it, enjoying it, impacts how we digest, and impacts the pleasure of it, and how we chew, and and turning off our food, off our screens, so that we're engaged in a positive way with our food is part of the process of gut health and looking after our gut microbiome way before we think about what's the best diet, which Lucy can go on to talk about. So it's holding that in context.
Yeah, it's brilliant, Sally, to make sure we're aware of that. Nutrition is normally only about sort of 30 to 40%, isn't it, of the whole picture? Maybe not with in relation to gut health, but it's certainly all these. I think I wanted to pick up something, Sally, you mentioned, I think, when you mentioned Tim Spector, and I know you know about this too, Ben. There was some research released very recently where they have been able to associate non-processed animal protein with a more favorable microbiome. And I just think that's so important to share, particularly within British farming at the moment, where we know that for a healthy diet we need to we definitely need to eat less animal protein, but that means that it needs to be really high quality, because there's so many valuable hidden nutrients in it. And so I think it was really exciting to hear that the top guy on gut health research, microbiome research in this country is saying, good quality non-processed animal protein has a really important role, as well as the plant fiber. And so, yeah, I mean, do you want me, shall I just go back to where we were at the beginning with just the sort of how it works really with the food that we take in? I mean, it is just as simple as the fiber is a carbohydrate. It's that part of the carbohydrate that we can't digest ourselves, and it's in all plants. It's often in the form of cellulose. It's obviously in grass, it's what cows are managing to magically make into milk. But from our own point of view, yes, it's the fiber in the fruit and vegetables we eat, in the nuts and seeds and beans and pulses, and it passes straight all the way through our stomachs, through our small intestine, and by the time it gets to our large intestine, that is where the bacteria then ferment it and produce all these products that we've been talking about that are so beneficial to the rest of our health. And as Sally said right at the start, we used to think that fiber was important just to keep our bowels regular and healthy, but it turns out that they're much more important than that. And in fact, that's why We've known for a long time that increasing fibre in our diet reduces our risk of heart disease, reduces our risk of diabetes, controls our cholesterol levels. Sally mentioned the more recent research on our mental well-being, but it's only in the last 5 years that they've made the link between the fibre and our microbiome and those diseases. So yeah, so fibre is what they call the prebiotic food. It's the food that becomes before the bacteria we're feeding it, and that then nurtures them. We can also, of course, eat probiotic food, which is food like live yogurt cultures that has beneficial bacteria already in it, and that just boosts our numbers that we have. And again, it's a shout out for dairy, really, because there are some fabulous dairy products that we produce in this country. Blue cheese, for one, a great fermented food. Yogurts, kefir is another one that is very exciting and actually arguably more beneficial for our gut bacteria because it contains or more beneficial for our gut health because it contains so many more cultures of live bacteria. And of course, there's lots of other sort of fermented foods that it's good for us to eat as well. We don't quite know how much of the bacteria in those foods can actually get to our large intestine because they've got to get through the acidity of the stomach first. Yeah, these are all the types of food that that are certainly very beneficial for our gut health.
Yeah, Sally, we've already mentioned Tim Spector a lot during the recording, and this is only meant as an overview and an introduction to the subject. But can you just give listeners a bit of a summary as to where the science currently sits, where the kinds of questions that we're asking at the moment, and what might we still what those big questions that might still need to be explored, what might they be?
I think we are at the point where we still don't have names for some of the bacteria we're discovering.
Okay.
So we're back there. And then we are learning about the roles that these bacteria have as a community and the jobs that they're doing. And so we're still at that level of understanding that symbiotic relationship and what they're doing for us. And then we're learning the patterns of when that community is disrupted and what those patterns look like and how they are starting to be linked with certain diseases, as well as what a healthy gut microbiome looks like and how that changes diseases and symptoms. And then I think we're at this stage where we're saying, well, what do we know that we can do to manipulate that and to improve health and to cultivate an environment where those better communities, that better looking communities can thrive and have those positive effects. And then I think where it's going is like, well, how do we manipulate that medically? Is the day of treating every disease with a massive drug with huge amount of side effects, is that over? And actually, is there going to be a future of where actually we can manipulate the gut microbiome in a way that resolves disease? It's the most exciting. We thought it was all going to be about genetics in the 90s, but actually, the microbiome is really unique to each individual. And I think it's the most exciting area of science when we're looking at the possibility of cures and reversing disease. So yeah.
Yeah. Lucy, what about you?
Yeah, it's interesting picking up on that point, Sally. You mentioned genetics, because I think, again, one of the key things that Tim Spector is producing in his research is that we're not a prisoner to our own genes, as they say. We're our genes are sort of, you knew better than I do, but it's at least 90% the same as the next person, I believe. And whereas our microbiome is only somewhere between sort of 10 and 30% the same as the next person. So,
wow.
That shows that we can have control of that. We can have control of our own health, which is just phenomenally exciting. And as Sally says, there's so much undiscovered yet that we don't even know. yeah, I think it's just win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are so many more questions I
Yeah.
want to ask, but we are going to have to wrap this up at some point because otherwise we will literally be going on all day. But I
Yeah.
mean, how can listeners find out more if they are interested? What would you advise? Apart from signing up for some consultancy with both of you, of course.
There's some great books out there. I mean, I think well, I shouldn't really mention his name again, but we have talked about Tim Spector quite a lot, and he's doing a lot for the nation at the moment, trying to get us all through COVID. So I think he deserves that. But yeah, so he has some great, extremely easy to read books on the subject. There are some fabulous setups to follow on social media. That there's always new research being released every day. You just have to follow gut health or gut microbiome, and you'll see a lot that's going on there. And yes, I'm always happy to talk about it a lot.
Sally, anything to add?
Yeah, so I love Zach Bush, especially if a bit more academic. So again, just following him on social media, he's doing some amazing research on the soil microbiome, and it's linked with the gut microbiome. It's wonderful. And I think then practically in terms of making lifestyle changes, knowing what to do and doing it are completely separate things, aren't they? And I think somebody like a Dr. Chatterjee has lots of resources to help people make change. And then I do my own gut health course. It's 6 weeks. I take small groups of 15, and we really look at all of the lifestyle aspects of how to improve gut health. And I think my next one starts at the beginning of April. I think I've still got a few places on that. So if somebody was interested, they could come on that. But yeah. So
Brilliant. And how do listeners connect with each of you? How do they contact you?
So I've got a website, drsallybell.com. I'm on most social media platforms as Dr. Sally Bell. And yeah, that would be the best. Or drop me an email at sally@drsallybell.com if you want.
Good branding.
Yeah, likewise. I am lucywilliamsonnutrition.co.uk. So have a look on my website, and there's all the information there on how to contact me. Email is great, or follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And I should also mention that I last year, actually during lockdown, like Sally, obviously became unable to do events, and I started I tried out a concept which I called the Gut Cafe, where I was trying to just provide a fun place for people to get together online. And I chat about gut health for 20 minutes, half an hour or so, and sometimes I link with a food producer and talk about practical ways of introducing it into your life. So yeah, look out for my gut cafes, because I'm doing them once a month or so, and it's a sort of drop in and lots of quick and easy information on there too.
Brilliant. That is all we have time for, but a massive thank you to my guests today, Dr. Sally Bell and Dr. Lucy Williamson. Sally has kindly given a discount code for anyone who wants to sign up to one of her 6-week online courses. If you look in the show notes for this episode, you'll find the links to these courses, and simply use the code SPRING2021 when you book. Also, if anyone's interested with my British Sea Buckthorn Company hat on, we're running a whole week of gut health related online events next month in March, including a webinar that Lucy's taking part in. Simply head to britishseabuckthorn.com and add your name to the mailing list to find out more about that, or follow us on Instagram at British Sea Buck, or on Facebook at British Sea Buckthorn Company. Just a casual plug there. I don't normally do that, but I thought it's finally relevant here, so I'm going to do that. Next time on the show, I'll be talking to Yorkshire-based farmer and environmentalist Richard Bramley. So I hope you can join me for that. But until then, have a great week. And it's goodbye from all of us here.